All right, welcome to The Ride. I'm Coach Q, and I'm happy to have you back for another episode. Today, I had the pleasure of sitting down with an absolute legend in our game, Coach Tom Duquette. Coach Duquette is a National Lacrosse Hall of Fame member and attackman at the University of Virginia, a member of 2 national championship winning teams, and a legendary high school coach at Norfolk Academy. Over the span of 42 seasons, he's captured multiple state titles and dozens of regional championships while helping shape generations of players and coaches through our game. As always, hopefully you find some value in it and enjoy the ride. Coach Duquette, welcome to the show. It's an honor to have you here today. This has been one that we've been trying to get scheduled for a little while. I'm glad we took the time. We had to do it after the TCIS game, of course. We had to let that one play its course. But Coach, it's phenomenal to have you on. I'm really excited for this combo.
It's a pleasure and honor to be on. I've been following you since I bumped into you by accident on YouTube. You've done some really interesting pieces. I loved your interview with Anish Shroff. Loved your interview with Mark Millen.
I'm happy to have you. It's going to be the struggle with this combo is going to be keeping it under an hour or around an hour. I know we could talk for 3. We already had a 10-minute discussion before we even pressed live here. Coach, what'd you like about the Anish video? I enjoyed that one as well. I thought he had a lot of.
You were able to elicit an honest response about the state of the game and how ridiculous it is that every major college game for 3 straight weekends occurred at noon on a Saturday. And that he was very upfront and honest about the rationale as to why, and was not bashful about castigating the lacrosse coaches for perpetuating that. That's something we talked about before, which is the best way to learn the game, other than to play it, is to watch it. And if I could have watched 3 games on a Saturday as opposed to having to pick one to watch, I would have been the better for that as developmentally. And I know young guys who are trying to learn to play the game would benefit from that. But they got to pick and choose, and if they choose wrongly, then all they go to is the highlights, and the highlights are great, but the highlights are very limiting if you want to learn about riding and clearing and all the other things that make up a game that don't show up in the highlights.
Coach, you mentioned going to Colorado this weekend here, the start of basically the tournament schedule for a lot of young guys. And you mentioned playing the game is important for them, but also, like you just talked about, with watching the game. Tell me a little bit about what you do when you watch a game with your young grandsons, developing that IQ. Any tips you give as they're watching, or you just kind of let them absorb it naturally?
And I will ask questions. Questioning may have been my superpower as a coach, and I didn't come by it naturally. I went to a basketball coaching clinic at Duke back in the early 90s. It was Grant Hill's freshman year at Duke. And the clinic was run by Krzyzewski, and he had a lavalier microphone on so you could hear everything he was saying. And I noticed that he just asked a lot of questions. And there was one fast break. Grant Hill came down on the break, and he just made an atrocious play. And I figured, having watched Coach K on the sidelines, he was going to blow his whistle and go crazy, which a lot of coaches would have done. But the ball didn't go out of bounds. He just let the play continue naturally, which is another thing I picked up from watching him. And finally, when there was a natural stoppage play, he blew his whistle. He looked at Grant. He said, "Grant, what'd you see on that break?" And it was up to Hill to analyze what happened, to figure it out. And he didn't even have to be told. He said, "Coach, that was a really stupid mistake. This is what I should have done." And then he puts the ball right back in play again. It was brilliant. Questions are really good because when the guys can come up with some of the coaching points on their own, they own it in ways that they don't own it when you tell them. So I ask them questions. They'll ask me questions. And sometimes they'll watch a game and they'll say, they'll come up with, did you see X, Y, or Z? I said, "No, I didn't." Let's go watch it, and we'll watch it, and they'll tell me why they chose. Um, it's a really cool way to interact with your grandsons over something that I hope they will grow to love, and they're sort of getting there. Um, but me watching that interaction with them, and then there'll be times that they'll want to go out and they'll see somebody throwing around the world, and they'll say, "How do you do that?" I said, "Well, how do you think you did it?" And then we'll go out in the street and we'll try it.
Mm-hmm. Well, having sons that played tennis, or I'm sure they played a little bit of lacrosse, but you told me that they got into tennis, and now having grandsons potentially picking up the lacrosse game has to feel good for you as a longtime lacrosse coach.
It skips a generation. My oldest son, who played number one tennis for NA through 11th grade, he actually came back. He was a classmate of Drew McKnight's, and actually my eldest son got Drew McKnight into lacrosse, and Drew McKnight got my eldest son into tennis. But he did come. He played as a senior for me, having played tennis the whole time. So he had the ball skills, and he was a basketball player, so he had that. But it's cool to see the two young ones really enjoy it.
Yeah,
we play catch a lot. Which makes they have gotten stick work organically. I haven't had to say go get on the wall or do this or do that. We play catch, and I'll throw them bad balls and well, how do you catch that? I said, well, throw me a bad one, I'll show you. And then I do make them. McCoy's a lefty, and we play catch 75% of the time righty. Hill's a righty, and we play catch 75% of the time as lefties.
Coach, you're going to Colorado this weekend, like I mentioned, to play in a tournament with them. It should be a great time. I'm sure it's great weather in that part of the country this time of year. Tell me a little bit about the club experience as you see it. Obviously, they're developing the part of the game by playing it, not just watching it with you. But tell me a little bit about these youngsters and youth development.
That one's there's a long answer and a short answer. The short answer is that part of what frustrates me about the club system, as the level of play rises, is that exposure becomes almost the raison d'etre for people to want to do it. And it appears, unfortunately to my taste anyway, that the sort of the fundamental rule of club lacrosse is if you give the ball up, you'll never get it back. And since you're never going to get it back, you're never going to give it up in the first place. And that's great if you want to showcase your individual skills, but if you're trying to if you're trying to develop as a player, you're stunning your growth because you're not making the plays that need to be made if you intend to be a truly functional part of a team and contribute to that team's success. It's the ultimate. Lacrosse, in my mind, is the ultimate team game, but the skills that you need to play it are developed on your own. And they're both important. And I lament the fact that, and I think it limits the development of IQ. If midfielders are used to coming down on the break and trying to take on the second guy instead of dumping it to the guy underneath them who's wide open, they may score. But as soon as they get to the next level, if they don't make that pass, they're going to be sitting and watching and not even having the opportunity to try to dodge the second guy. And that's my own personal bias, and I'm sure some would argue with that. And when I was coaching these JO guys, 7th and 8th graders this spring, that was a battle that I had to fight early on because a bunch of them had been playing on the outside, and they were really, really hesitant to give up the ball in a timely fashion.
Yeah.
And the timely piece is unbelievably important, because if you give it up too late, it doesn't matter. But if you give it up when it's supposed to be given up, then really good things can happen for your team. And just maybe, if you keep running, the guy you give it up to might just give it back to you, if that's the way they're coached. And that was an evolution this spring, that some of the guys started to realize if they threw it down, they might just get it back in a better position they were than where they were when they gave it up. And it got a whole lot easier to score. But
one of the best examples of the principles that you're talking about, Coach, and I'm going to flow in and out a little bit of the conversation here, but
do.
Princeton in 2026 was phenomenal to watch. And in that national championship game, I don't think I've ever seen a perfect game plan or just a perfect sharing of the ball, as you've mentioned, than Princeton.
They were. I've watched it, I guess, 3 times now, but they were the unselfishness of all of them was just at another level. But the other piece of it was that conceptually, there was always someone in a position where they could actually be unselfish. There was always somebody ahead of the ball. There was always somebody behind the ball. And there's always somebody moving to make themselves dangerous. So the structure helped to allow them to play that way. And then they had the skill. And the other thing about them, which in hindsight, watching them, they manipulated matchups and stuff. But ultimately, Wade didn't care what length stick he had on him or who he had on him. He was going. And Palumbo didn't care what length stick he had on him. He was going. And I think in some systems, each of them would have been discouraged from either challenging a pole or challenging the guy who was arguably the best defensive midfielder in the country. He said, "No, we have confidence in you in this matchup, and we're not worried about the matchup. We're worried about us and doing what we do. And if we do what we do, you're going to have a problem." And that seemed painfully evident from like halfway through the first quarter of the Duke game, right on through to the end.
Yeah. Well, conversely, in the national championship game, the defense played a brand of team ball by going to the zone, and I've never seen a team flustered that bad in a game of that magnitude by a zone defense. Yeah. They didn't care about the matchups either.
No, and the zone that I played for a long time. People would ask, "Well, how did you stop so and so? How would you stop so and so?" I said, "Well, we didn't. We stopped them, but it wasn't anything individual that stopped them. It was the fact that we played a zone which was very difficult to deal with, and it was a team effort in stopping them. It wasn't any individual matchups, because we didn't care about matchups. This is our defense. This is where you need to be. This is where the sport's coming from. If we do it right, we should be okay." And more often than not, we were. Not all the time, but more often than not.
Coach, I'm going to do a tough job at jumping around here, because I'm really excited to have this convo with you, and there's so many topics that I want to hit. Kind of jumping back into youth game, but also a big announcement from Virginia, which you went to the University of Virginia. You're a fantastic player. You won championships there. The youth game at the high school level in Virginia, right? The high school, you coached at Norfolk Academy. You retired in 2019 after a stellar run. Stellar almost is underselling it. What is your makeup of high school lacrosse in Virginia and the product that Virginia is putting out? And then I'd also like to jump into this Cassese news at the University of Virginia and what your thoughts are.
It's I'm of several minds, and I can't speak really articulately about the state of public school lacrosse. Generally, across high school, across the entire landscape, there is a public and private. There's a dearth of qualified coaches, one, and there is a dearth of qualified referees. There's not enough of either to go around. and it's a problem. Um, the um, I don't know how many public schools you guys played against this spring. Mount Academy didn't scrimmaged Atlee a year ago, played Atlee 2 years ago, scrimmaged some of the locals again 2 and 3 and 4 years ago, and the level just was completely different. That's whether for whatever reason, and yeah, the game as it has developed down here. Thankfully, it's a varsity sport now. I hope it will continue to stay that way. But given some of the numbers, I think there's some challenges there.
Yeah.
With some schools having to combine just to be able to field a team. A bunch of people worked long and hard to get it recognized. In reality, it's the only major metropolitan area, almost from Boston to Jacksonville.
Talking about the Hampton Roads area for the viewers and listeners at home.
It does not have recognized varsity lacrosse at the high school level. The rest of the state does. Michigan does. The Valley does. Northern Virginia really does. So it's there are a lot of people playing.
Yeah.
And the number of them, and a few of them, are matriculating at the highest level and making contributions at the highest level. The great majority of the good players within the state are, I think, have chosen wisely. And a bunch of them have gone to CNU, and one of the reasons CNU is so good is because they got a bunch of Virginia public high school players. It's one of the reasons they're so good. But and with the proliferation of some of the more high-profile club programs, I think there'll be more exposure. Some of these guys, Anthony's been around for 12 or 15 years. The Hawks, whoever owns them now, by whatever name they go now, I don't know what it is.
91, I think. Team 91.
Probably by private equity, who knows? And with Advance and FCA down here, there are more opportunities to grow as players. Coastal Lacrosse is a great place for people to start. And I've been involved with that one from the time my seventh grade grandson was in second. And there are lots of guys playing, and girls, not just guys.
The public private conversation is interesting. I had that with Quint. He was mentioning on the island that you get a lot of situations where the private schools are picking off some of the public school talent, and I know that's happening everywhere.
Yeah, and it's happening to a greater extent other places than here. Part of that, I think, is probably the demographics of the area, but it's
yeah.
I wouldn't want to be coaching in the MIA right now. The level of recruiting, the boarding component makes it very difficult for the playing field to be level. I mean, that should be evident with St. Anne's success so far this year.
Yep.
They were really good. They were really fun to watch. Really fun to watch. And Nick Bell had a very well-deserved reputation of developing players and developing national caliber teams at Taft when he brought that to Stab. And they were really good. But when I was doing my research to call their first game this year, their game with them this year, that one of their really good players, Loyola commit, David Gould, just decided, I try to do one of the reasons I think people enjoy when I call games and when I call them with stock is that we do our homework. I spend more time watching film of opponents to broadcast them than I ever watched to coach them. I was more concerned with us than them. But in my role as trying to broadcast, I need to do both teams justice. And to do that, I have to know who their guys are, what they can do, so I can talk about them reasonably intelligently. And so I wanted to do a little research on David Gould. And as a junior, and he committed to Loyola September 1 or close to it his junior year. And in his junior lacrosse season, he had, I think it was 62 goals and 56 assists. I know it was in the 60s and the 50s. The last ditch maybe different, but it was over 110 points. But those 110 points were scored for school in Fishersville, Indiana. And he chose to, or was enticed, however you want to characterize it,
Sure.
to come to Stab. He made, and I'm sure he had a fabulous lacrosse experience. He made them really good. And he played the game. He played the game properly. He was not of the club mentality of he had to do everything. He let the game come to him. If what was required was for him to get the goal, he got there. If what was required for him of him was to move the defense and get the ball moving, that's what he did. But that makes it difficult for anybody who's essentially homegrown. I mean, their best player a year ago was Colin Marr.
Yeah.
And he made them really good because he's really good. But they have a boarding department, which Catholic doesn't have. No, Academy doesn't have.
No.
And
it does make it tough when you look down that roster and say how many Virginia boys are on that team, truly. But I totally get where you're coming from, and they were a fantastic team this year. I want to give a shout out as well to Paul VI.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
They did fantastic, especially in that DC area. I think they played St. John's in their conference championship and beat them, and then played a good collegiate team and beat them the next day. And just for them to represent Virginia in the way they're doing in that area.
Their program has grown, and it is solidly in the national conversation.
Mm-hmm.
How many boys does Catholic have? 9 to 12.
9 through 12, probably. If you're talking about 50% of the population, it would be 200.
Okay, they have 3 to 4 times that.
Yeah,
makes a difference. And the other piece, and this is the demographics also. If you're a high school player who aspires to play at the next level, and it was probably occurred to you that that the exposure and experience that you get in public schools might not be sufficient to attain your goals. So your choices of a place to go are sort of Landon, Bolus, Georgetown Prep, etc. All of which have fairly hefty price tags. And there's PBI. It makes perfect sense, economic and otherwise. I don't begrudge them. They get what they get, and they do really good stuff with it. They can really play. They play an exciting, aggressive, in-your-face brand of lacrosse. It's good to watch.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure there's folks not in the state of Virginia that are interested in that, but also want to hear more about things not related to Virginia lacrosse. They'll have to wait one question because I want to ask you about this Kevin Cassese hire. I don't want to delve into the Lars stuff. I thought that was one of the more dramatic coaching exits and just dramatic things around a coaching hire that I've ever seen. But we don't have to touch on that. I think enough has been put on paper and on video for that. But give me your thoughts on this process and then the Cassese hire.
I am very I was unhappy at the outset. I'm not sure. I think the hire, and I have no problem with the hire either. It makes perfect sense. Though I think given the speed with which it had to happen, it may have been a lazy hire. Again, I'm not sure. Again, this is my own personal.
Sure, it is.
But Kevin Cassese is a really good man, and he is going to represent the university and lacrosse program very, very well. I think they will probably maybe be defensively a little more conservative than Lars' teams were. Whether that's good or bad, I don't know. He has stated publicly the desire to get two really good coordinators, and I hope he's able to do that. And there's some really good ones out there. You can see the value of really strong coordinators watching Princeton play. But the coordinators on both sides of the ball would be really good, and had their guys unbelievably well prepared to deal with the rigors of Duke and Notre Dame. I don't know what the rest of the alumni body thinks of the hire. I guess some may be ecstatic, some may be not. I don't know what the players think. I have no way to measure that. But the fact that the only evidence that you can point to is that there's only one Virginia guy in the poll right now. I would think I would think if they were unhappy, more of them would have chosen to explore other opportunities. And I hope I'm right in that analysis. But but I may not be. I don't know.
I think you're spot on. I think if people were frustrated with the state of what was going on, they would enter the transfer portal. But it speaks to the coaching staff hire as well as the quality of the university and the quality of lacrosse and how they finished, to be honest, as well. I mean, the team went on a run there at the end, so I'm excited to watch them here into the future. One of the things that makes them a really exciting watch are the two Millen brothers. I wonder, from your offensive mind, you were talking about being two-handed early in the show, thinking about what about their game really entices you. What do you think makes them great?
There are several things about it. One is the two-handedness. They are equally dangerous. But the thing which jumps out most is, have you watched any of Roy Colsey's podcast recruiting? He's got a recruiting platform that he's selling, but he did a series of podcasts maybe 3 weeks ago where he listed the five qualities of a lacrosse player. He did one a day, and he was going from the least important to the most important. And he started with speed. That was number 5. He says speed is fine, but speed's often overrated. For some players, it just means you get to the wrong place faster. Was his statement. And the next was strength. With a similar snide remark. I can't remember what it was. It's next. I remember numbers 2 and 1. Because number 2 was skill. And number 1 was IQ. And it's the IQ piece that the Millen brothers have. And from my own perspective as a coach, I like younger brother's decision making better than older brother, but it just by a whisker. And they love to play. They do not shy away from the spotlight, because given who they are and how they came into the program, it's on them all the time. They're always they're one or the other of them will always draw the number 1. And whoever and the other will be the beneficiary of having his brother draw the number 1, because he'll get the number 2. And there's a difference. Even at that level, there's a difference. But then the rest of the Sunderland on the inside was a perfect foil for them, because there was somebody they knew. If he just had a whisker of space, they could throw it in there, and something good was probably going to happen. I think he stabilized that group more than maybe anybody realizes. And Terenzi was huge. Once he got back to full health, Colsey, Weathers, and Midfielder, Tackman, they had, and then they were essentially, for much of the year they were playing with 5 attackmen and a midfielder. Which cost them sometimes going the other direction. It can happen quickly. But offensively, they were fun to watch once they sort of got their stuff together, which happened in that run from.
Yeah. I was a big proponent of Sean Light winning the Tewaaraton. I had said, like, hey, there's a route. We don't get it much. We have never gotten it, I should say, that a defensive player won the Tewaaraton. He ended up winning. You know, in the back of my mind, I really wanted Joey to win it because I do think, like you were mentioning with the Millen brothers, the spotlight has been on him. He never had a number two or a number one. He was never able to be a number two guy. He was always the number one, even from freshman year. But give me a little bit about your thoughts on Joey as he now is moving on to the pros and leaves behind a stellar college career.
He's an unbelievable player. His skill level off the charts. IQ, ditto. In a sense, that the burden that he shouldered, anybody that wears 22 there has got a target on their front and their back and probably every place else, being if they step on the field. And to put up the numbers that he did against the competition that he did, remarkable achievement. I'm curious, and his first game in the pros was pretty spectacular. It's 2 and 3 or something, maybe better than that.
I think it was. I think he had 7 total points.
7. I saw 5 of the 7. And he looked, and again, watching a pro game on TV and watching Syracuse on TV, except on Saturday when I watched him in the Final Four, he just looked like he was playing more freely. And somebody with those prodigious skills playing freely is a scary prospect.
Break that down for me. You mentioned earlier, and this doesn't have to do with Spallina. This has more to do, I think, with offensive players in general. But letting the game come to you, playing freely, what does that mean to you when it comes to an offensive trait or a trait of a great player?
It means the willingness to do what is required in a given situation, and that the situation may require that you go get the ball from a defenseman crossing the midline because you're in serious trouble, and then making sure it doesn't leave your end for a little while so the defensive guys can get a blow. It means realizing as you come up there and get that thing and you turn to face the field, that there's an advantage created because your midfielders have been busting down the field. And you need to understand that you need to reward them for the effort. It means if the situation demands that you guys score, and your teammates are looking for you to either do that or facilitate that, then you got to be prepared to do it. It is not just about you and what you can do, and more about what you can do that can serve the greater good. And then being able to deal with pressure of the moment. A lot of that has to do with the way you practice and the way you're coached. It's one thing I've always liked about Syracuse. For the most part, they're unafraid. They're going. Sometimes it gets them in trouble, but they're going.
How do you prepare that way? How do you get your players to be totally unafraid of that moment? Maybe they can't do it totally. Maybe some guys.
Most would probably be aghast had they come to watch one of our practices, because the amount of time that we spent doing things that involved up and down. Even our fast break drills were real time, full field. We played full field a lot, and the guys were encouraged. And this is the coaching part. The guys were encouraged to, and it was usually done through questions. Encouraged to come up with that things are going to happen in a hurry, and they're always going to happen in a hurry. And my thought was that we're going to make better decisions at speed than your guys are, because that's the way we practice all the time. if someone should have thrown the ball to somebody and didn't because they were afraid they weren't going to catch it. No, that's a play you need to make, because if you're going to play at the next level, that's the pass you need to make. Make it. He may not catch it this time. He may not catch it next time, but there's going to come a time when he's going to catch it. It's going to matter. Make the play, make the decision that you need to make when you need to make it. And everything that we did was an attempt to simulate real game speed for as much of the practice as we possibly could, so that people were making decisions. That's one reason I love multi-sport athletes, because football players and basketball players, particularly guys like cornerbacks and quarterbacks and point guards, anybody on a basketball court, every day in practice, they were making a gazillion decisions. Not necessarily lacrosse decisions, but they're making decisions in competition at speed. And if you don't make them at speed, then the moment's gone. So there's a crossover from playing those other sports, which is invaluable to being able to react when a similar thing is asked of you on the lacrosse field.
I love basketball players because of exactly what you just mentioned. It's a gray area sport. They're making a ton of decisions. I love football players because there's nowhere to run on a football field. You really cannot run from the moment. It's going to come at you in a lot of ways.
And cornerbacks, I mean, do you come up support the run? You buy the fake? Do you worry about your guy and then the guy runs 12 yards around the end that you were supposed to? You're making those decisions all the time. And that was sort of Colsey's point about that IQ is really the is the developed sense to make the right decisions at speed, and at least attempt to execute them. You're not always going to be right. You also can't be afraid to. You can't be afraid to fail. And as a coach, you also can't. If you're encouraging them to play fast, they're going to make mistakes. Part of the deal. And you can't castigate them for making a mistake if you're asking them to play fast, and mistakes are given. And that's, sometimes that's hard to do, given that coaches like to micromanage just about everything. Speaking as one who was a lifelong coach, so
that playing at pace is an interesting balance between. We tried it this year where we were playing very fast early in the year, and then some, things go poorly with playing fast, and you kind of have to just jiggle with it a little bit.
Or the other alternative is that you double down, and because ultimately, you had Coach Duffy on the podcast earlier in the year, which I listened to as well. And he wanted his defense. He hated to give up goals. I understand. I love to score goals. He understood that too. And I said, really, I said, you go do what you do, but really, all I care about from that end of the field is that you hold them to one less than we get, and we're going to get a lot. So just. Make sure you hold them one less than we get.
Yeah.
And we often help people to way less than one less than we got. But that was I don't know whether Rodney Roman, who was a goalie on our championship teams back in the day, was a really good goalie coach at St. Anne's for the longest time. That was one of the things he told his goalies constantly. He said, don't worry about that last one. Just hold them one less than we get. Does wonders for a goalie psyche. Particularly when an All-American goalie is the one that's telling them that.
I love that. I love that mentality of getting on to the next one. Yeah, it's a funny dynamic between offensive coaches and defensive coaches. We'll play against a tough team and lose by 1, but it'll be 16-15, and the offensive coaches are saying, we had such a great game, and then we'll win a game 7-8. And the coaches are like, man, I'm glad that we won that game, but it was such a frustrating performance. I'm like, guys, we had a great day. So it is that funny push-pull between offensive and defensive coaches. But ultimately, again, if you beat them by 1, that's all that matters. Coach, I'm interested. I had Colin Brown on the podcast this past week, a Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year for Ohio State, and he was mentioning that, just through our conversation, he had mentioned that he liked the more pressure that built. He enjoyed that and always saw himself as a guy who played better as the game went on. And I think that's an undervalued or understated. It's hard to quantify that on a stat sheet. And I just wonder how you think about that, playing your best at the most important time, and who did that the best for you throughout your years, if you could think of a couple players that come to mind. But I'm interested, just playing your best at the best moment.
Part of the ability to do that is they need to be put in those kinds of challenging situations as much as they can be placed in them in practice. And part of that is that if I had two or three pretty good attackmen and I had two or three pretty good defensemen, that practice was a war every single day. As a player growing up, not growing up, as a player at Virginia, there was a defenseman we had. His name was Tom Showalter. He's an orthopedic surgeon in Charlottesville, recently retired. He was a Schmeiser Award winner his fourth year, my second. And whenever we went out to do anything, whether it was half field, full field, he would always come play me. And the attackman that I played behind the goal with me, his name's Jay Connor. Jay is also in the Hall of Fame. And Doc Show would always come play me. He said, "Doc, would you go play Connor, please? I'm tired of this." He says, "No, because you're going to make me." And that was a competition that we had, a high level competition every single day. Game day was a piece of cake. To the extent that at one point in that year, my second year, I didn't know what to do when I got to the front of the goal in the game, because I never got there in practice, because he was such a pain in the ass to play against. Still scares me. He was a surgeon with his stick defense.
The game has changed. Like, you look at football over the years, moving from like major two-a-days and just bashing heads basically every practice. And there's some of that in lacrosse where it's just a cultural thing that, more reps, less hitting. How do you balance that, maybe at all? Or how do you look at that, of getting the reps but also having that war take place? Or do you look at it as we've gotten a little too soft these days of taking that out of the game?
Well, I always like to end practice with some 1v1 grounders, just because. That is the ultimate competition. And there's sort of a continuum from sort of the individual skill-based stuff, whether it's stick work or shooting, offensive footwork, defensive footwork, through to the implementation of those things in small-sided enterprises, to implementing those things in the half-field set, to implementing those things in the full-field set. And as you sort of go up that ladder, things become more game-like, and in becoming more game-like, they become necessarily more competitive. And early on in a season, a practice would sort of follow that framework. But as the season progressed, there was more of the little bit of stuff at the beginning, just refined, just to get your shooting iron dialed in, or make sure that your footwork wasn't getting sloppy, or that your stick wasn't too busy. And then a lot of the other end of that, which was active road guided play, where, and part of that is motivation for the guys. They love to play, and play. If you play with proper constraints applied, you can get amazing stuff done. We would play, and I might place a constraint. For example, the instant that we gain possession of the ball, I'm going to count 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, 4, 1,000. If the ball hadn't moved by the time I say 5, 1,000, you put it down and go play defense. It accomplishes several things. One, has people get their heads up and looking, but people realize that just because he's looking, if there's nobody there to throw it to, then what good am I? So the collateral benefit is some of what you saw from Princeton, which is there was always somebody ahead of the ball and behind the ball. And if I need to move it now, I can move it now because there's somebody that's going to be there. And then I've made also placed a constraint where you're not allowed to pass the ball unless you make a second guy play you. And then you're obligated to pass it. You can't try to take the next guy on.
Yeah.
Those are the two extremes. And if you play for 5 or 10 minutes with sort of those guardrails on, it's amazing how both sides of the ball end up having to react to that. Because the constraint is essentially on the offense, the defense has to struggle to keep up with it. And they get stuff, they're forced into situations organically, without having to structure a drill to make them come to those decisions.
Coach, I always try to selfishly take a little tidbits for my guys that I'm seeing in practice and throughout the course of a season. You have offensive players sometimes that lack the initiative or the confidence to go to the goal, right? Like when you were just talking about setting a constraint as you can't pass, maybe, so you have to go do something. I'm just wondering how you think about building that initiative, or is that kind of an innate thing that you can't?
No, well, part of it is, again, I got it personally from watching, and I encourage everybody. I gave the seventh graders when we left practice on Friday. I said, you guys need to watch a college game this weekend, and I told them which ones are on and when they were on. I said, you need to watch one. Go find a guy who plays your position and see what he does. My running joke in that one was, if you watch Virginia, whatever Robbie Hopper does, do the opposite, because he does crazy stuff which often ends up in something really good, but not always. And then on Monday I would just sort of at random I'd ask them, what'd you learn on Friday? What'd you learn on Saturday? And we sort of had to be prepared that I might actually call on to answer the question, which maybe meant that they watched it a little more intently, and whether they wanted to or not, they learned something. But when you can go and when you can't. But the other thing about the confidence to go, you have to have confidence in your own ability to carry the ball without losing it. You have to have the confidence in your ability to change directions and cause problems without losing it. And all that comes from some of the early season drill and practice work both on footwork and on developing the confidence to withstand whatever kind of pressure you need to withstand. One of my favorite drills, I've been doing it. I did it when I probably learned it in high school, maybe even before that. But Bob Scott, the longtime coach at Hopkins, we wrote the first lacrosse technique and tradition before Petromalo updated it, the originals. And he called it confidence drill, and his right-handed attackman. I put the stick in my right hand. Sometimes the direction was carried with one, sometimes it was carried with two. Right-handed attackman, my left foot was a pivot foot, and I couldn't move it. Pivot foot like a basketball. And then the defender could do whatever they wanted to do to try to dislodge the ball. My job was to pivot, to try to keep my body between my stick and the defender, use my guard arm to block what I could block, to realize if he's coming behind me, that I have to go to the front or whatever. And then I'd let the attackman whack on the defensive with the same constraints, which they always love. Okay, I said, okay, now you're lefty attackman. And it was almost like a rodeo ride. You could survive to the bell. Um, so and so they realized that they could withstand some pretty intense pressure, not being able to move at all. And I said, okay, now I want you to hold it with two hands, and I want you to get a good power cradle going to see how hard it is for them to shake it loose. And well, I mean, the defense could kayak, the defense could do whatever, could literally do whatever they want. I said, just please don't hit him in the head. But short of that, you can almost do whatever you want. And the confidence developed to hold on to the ball was, it happens, and it happens organically.
I love that drill. I mean, all the way up, right? That would be a fantastic drill for college guys, but I love that for youth and just developing that confidence. Yeah.
When I coached the youth guys, one of the guys got tired of. I said, when you run right, you carry right. When you run left, you carry left. Well, because if you watch young guys play, they're running their left and they're right-handed, and they try to keep it on their right-handed. They can't do anything.
Yeah.
I don't care that you necessarily at the outset that you be able to do anything over there other than be able to run with it and protect it. So I do that with fifth graders all the way through my high school guys, and have for a long time.
Coach, you've been coaching 30 plus years. I'm probably underselling that. Was it 30 or 40?
43.
43.
Well, actually, no. 39 at NA, Fort St. Anne's, Belfield, Fort Virginia. That's 47.
I'm interested in this experience you've had, coaching in that time, and I want to delve into it. We're almost at an hour. In that time, you gave me a good example of yourself as a player and talking about confidence in big moments. From your time coaching, and I know you've had a ton of players, so I don't want to do any of or all of those players a disservice by just pointing out a few, but I'm going to ask you if there's a player or two that stick out in the same way that you mentioned that story about confidence as a player, just coaching a few guys.
There are, well, some of your viewers will know these names. One is Drew McKnight. He availed himself of all opportunities developmentally. He played on the under-19 national team in either 95 or 96. I forget which year they went. But he went to the under-19 tryouts, and he was on attack with two Baltimore guys, and one of them took the right hand, and one of them took the point. So he just said, "Well, I'll go be the lefty." And I got some calls from college coaches the weekend after that trial had concluded, who asked this question: "What's the deal with your lefty?" I said, "Well, the deal with my lefty is he's actually a righty. He just chose to be a lefty because that's what the situation required." And he ended up being a three-time All-American, ACC Player of the Year. And his son, by the way, you will hear about if you haven't already. His son is named Wade McKnight. He plays for Pistol School Dallas, and he's phenomenal. That's one. Another one is there's stories that go with that sort of indicate the why for each of these guys. The guy who played, his name is Neil Redfern. You may have seen some conversations around town that say he'll kneel on me. He's a cancer survivor, but he was 5'10", 140 at NA. Tackman, also state champion wrestler, by the way. And neither of us thought he could be a Division I lacrosse player. So he went to WNL. They made him a midfielder, and he sat on the bench his entire first year. Second year, they put him back on attack. He set the single season point record. And I got a call from him at the end of that season. He said, "Coach, I'm transferring to Carolina." And he had family connections. And he transferred. And this was way before the portal days. He transferred. Once he got in, he called Willie Scruggs. Said, "Can I try out for your team?" He said, Willie said, "If you can survive practice, we'll give you a jersey." And not only did he survive practice, but he ended up being a two-time All-American at Carolina. But when it was called, I said, "Why are you doing this?" And his response was, "I need to know if I'm good enough." And then my follow-up was, well, what if you find out you're not? I said, that's okay. I just need to know if I am. And then he went and did what he did.
It's an amazing story.
As an attacker for Carolina. I got one more good one for you. And just because this is, I don't know whether you know the name Eric Martin. You're a little too young for that. Eric came to the game late. I put a long stick in his hand as a junior. He was not even all TCIS as a senior. He's a really good soccer player, 6'2", 215, run like the wind. He went to Salisbury when Salisbury was on the run of a bunch of straight national championships. And he went to talk to Coach Berkman, middle of his first year. He said, Coach, how come I'm not playing? He said, well, you're not playing because your feet aren't good enough and you make too many mistakes with the ball. So Eric said, okay. He started jumping rope every day. And he started hitting the wall with much a greater fervor than he had been before. The second year, he's a starting pole and first team all conference. Next year, he is the Division III Defenseman of the Year. And as a senior, he's the Division III Player of the Year. He asked for feedback. His coach gave him that feedback, and he acted on it. And Eric would come back and talk to our guys. He said he was on the West Coast playing professionally. He played professionally indoors and out. Was an all-star both in the box and in the field. He would come back and talk to the guys, and he told this story. And then there was a coda at the end of it. And he said, I'm in the box, and I always had to match up against Marichek or Gate. I always got the top guy on the other team, always. So he went to his coach and said, well, why do I get these guys? Can you put somebody else on them? Give me a little break. Coach said no. And Eric said, well, why? He said, well, the coach's response was, you have the best feet on the team.
Full circle.
Absolutely full circle. Some kids will ask what I need to do to get better, and then it's a self-serving lip service question. Like they don't really want to know the answer because the answer is too hard. He asked the question, got an answer that he didn't like, but he knew what he wanted to do, and he fixed the problem. And he was on the world team. He was on the world team in 2010. Pretty good.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
Coach, fantastic breakdown there behind the scenes with some fantastic players that you've coached over the years. I'm interested in coaches who've coached you as well and what you've learned from them.
Okay.
And maybe a couple stories, just like the ones you just told. I think they're fantastic. I
had been blessed in my lacrosse life with Hall of Fame coaches at every juncture. Some of your viewers, listeners will know some of these names. Most they will not. One of my first coaches was a guy named John Patterson. Many will know him as Wesley Patterson. John Wesley Patterson, chief of the Tuscarora. If you look at old wooden sticks, they were made by Patterson. He went to Springfield and was the PE teacher at Dumbarton Junior High School when I was at Dumbarton Junior High School. And he was one of my first lacrosse coaches. He brought a team from the reservation down in 1963 or 4 to play against us. And from John Patterson, I learned about the Native American game. He taught me how to string a stick. A skill which at times I felt cursed to have because too many people asked me to string their sticks back when they were all traditional strung. But he taught me how to do that. And he also taught me a lot about how to play. I had 2 youth league coaches then. One of whom is in the Cornell Hall of Fame. His name's Tom Nuttall. When I got to Gilman, I had 2 grand gentlemen who coached the JV team, who halfway through a game, like 4 games into the season, took 3 freshman attackmen on a JV team, which had juniors at the time. Said, you guys are going at halftime. And the confidence he instilled, and I never sat until I never sat. at Gilmanite, George Shanley, Hall of Fame. He taught me, advised me, coached me. He's why I do what I do. One of his assistants was a guy named Emil Buzzy Budnitz, All-American, Hopkins. He came and just worked with the attack guys on occasion. I went, I was a smart-ass right-hand shooter and got a feed low on the break. And I faded to the pipe and stuck it over the goalie's left shoulder, as opposed to coming to the front and opening up the goal and making it easy. And he asked me a question. He said, "What are you doing?" And I had the temerity to say to a Hall of Fame attackman, "I'm drawing the goalie to the pipe so I can shoot it over his shoulder." And then I played with a bunch of really, some of the guys that I played with at Virginia in the Hall of Fame. I worked with Jim Adams, Hall of Fame, as an assistant at Virginia. And as a youth player, the team I was on in sixth grade, it had three National Hall of Fame members on it. Me, Jack Thomas, and Skip Lickfus. The neighborhood in which I grew up was a bunch of really good players, guys who turned into good players, who loved playing the game and were around it all the time, watching it and playing it with the place to play it.
I love that you bring this up, because going full circle back to our original conversation, and you said the game is missing out on coaches and referees. And I just wonder about, your development if you didn't have some of those coaches that you're talking about here.
It would have been very, very different. It would have been very, very different. They were all unbelievably encouraging and positive. And the ones that weren't are not memorable. The ones that were are. And all the lessons I learned were not necessarily positive ones. Like I worked with Coach Adams for 4 years. I was sort of back when scouting was illegal and film exchanges were not de rigueur. I was on the road all season. The only time I got to see Virginia play was at the end. And my job was to scout and provide intel on the other guys. One of the things I learned from that was that, my own take from it was that we spent way too much time worrying about the other guys and not worrying about ourselves. Because we were pretty good. And if we were worried, and this is my young mind thinking, then if we spent a little more time worrying about us, we could crush people. We won a lot. And I can't argue with a Hall of Fame coach, other than one of the reasons I didn't watch film as a coach is because I wanted to worry about us, not them. And that came from there. And then I've had some really good assistants over the years, one of whom, Dave Thomas, who served his stepson, J.P. Stewart, was the head coach at Wesleyan for a long time. DT and I worked together for a long time. We were simpatico with the way we saw the game, because most of the game that he knew, he learned from me. Neil Duffy, for the longest time, fabulous working relationship, great friend. And then more recently, Ryan Tucker. And along the way, we always had, a Navy guy or two who was around, stopped in and coached for a little while. Ben Bailey was one. Really good player at the Naval Academy. So it's the people that you are with have a lot to do with how you end up, and have an impact on the guys. One of the questions that you didn't ask, which actually selfish, I would like to answer.
Yeah, sure.
Was what about the teams that you coached at NA? Are you most of what from the teams that you played against at coached at NA are you most proud of? And there are really three of them. One of them is that 21 of our guys ended up captaining their college teams. That's pretty cool.
That's awesome.
the number of them who are actively involved, either playing, either coaching, playing, refereeing. I'm immensely proud of that fact. And the last one is that it would constantly amaze me because coaches would say after the game, particularly when they played us for the first time, and they would say, "I heard that you played hard and played fast, but I had no idea that you played that hard and that fast." And that was 90% the guys and the culture that had been developed over time. This is what we do. We're going to play fast and we're going to play hard, and we don't think you're going to be able to deal with it. And if you do, we're going to shake hands at the end of this game and say, "Nice game." But that may have been the ultimate compliment. Your guys play so hard and so fast.
And that's a culture that still endures. As a member of Catholic high school that's had to play NA a bunch, and it's a fun rivalry that still endures even, 5, 6, 7 years now that you've retired from NA. So that's a real testament to you and to Ryan Tucker, who's, carried the mantle of responsibility now there.
Our trajectories are almost identical. He went to Gilman, as did I. He went to Virginia, as did I. And we were both involved in this. Where I was and he is involved in this coaching foolishness. So,
foolishness. All right, Coach, I've got you maybe for another 10 more minutes. We could
whatever you want to do.
Look, I could sit here for 3 hours, but it's tough. People, it's a new age in 2026. People don't want to sit down for 2 hours and taking a podcast. But I love that you mentioned the offensive coordinators or the coordinators from Princeton, Coach Jim Mitchell. Actually, I've recently heard that he's a fan of the show. So big shout out to him and what they were able to get done. I have a question, start, sub, or sit, that I would like you to answer, basically ranked from 1, 2, and 3. I thought Princeton did this immaculately in the national championship, but pace, space, and matchups. I would love you to start, sub, sit, and then we can kind of break down each of those if possible, and maybe ones that I left off from an offensive perspective.
The last one was matchup. The middle one was pace. What was the first one?
Space.
The space piece was Princeton's understanding of space.
Well, real quick, I'm talking about yourself from your coaching perspective.
Okay.
Princeton did this really well.
Pace is first.
Okay.
Pace is first. Because if you play at pace and practice at pace, matchups never matter. And space happens organically because if you play fast, you learn to understand space. Because this silly game is either about having an advantage and recognizing where it is and exploiting it, or not having an advantage and creating one so that you now have an advantage, which you can then exploit. Which is my point about that one drill where you're not allowed to throw it unless you make somebody else play you. Okay, it's neutral. Defense is in, defense is set. So defenses are really hard to score against. You have to manufacture something, either with your people movement, with your ball movement, with your individual skill off the dribble. You have to manufacture or use some two-man game. There are a whole host of ways in which it can happen, but you need to, in an advantage-less situation, you need to create one. And if you can't beat anybody off the dribble, if you don't have a way to create an advantage 6-on-6, you're just waiting for the shot clock to expire so you can go play defense.
So you're saying create that advantage with pace before you get to that moment.
That's the easiest way to beat Princeton's zone defense would have been to beat it down the field. But they were so skilled in their substitution game And see that in the modern game, it is so specialized that for many teams, they don't trust their defensive guys enough to beat the defense down the field. They're bailed into the box.
Yep.
And if you have some midfielders and poles for that matter, who this is one of the things Robbie Hopper does really well, is going forward. There are advantages to be had just because the nature of the way people play in early offense because of what's happening in the sub game. Even when you don't try to manipulate it consciously, they're there. And if you are attuned to trying to exploit those things, you get to score a lot of goals with a whole lot less work. And then once it's settled down, now the job now becomes different. Now, once you create an advantage, then the game is the game. 6v5 is a 6v5. You make the defense move, you find and you try to move it quickly and crisply enough with passes that are good enough that there can be transfers so that there's no time for the defense to recover. But is either the transition is either you manufacture or it is given to you by the pace at which you play, or you have to create advantages, and then with all the myriad of ways that can happen. Principal game, beat somebody off the dribble.
Got it. So if I'm ranking these now, it starts sub or sit. So you're starting pace, space, or matchups are the other two options. How are you ranking those?
Space is up there. It is almost without an understanding of space, it's really hard to play the game. And Princeton's intuitive understanding of space. I have a document I put together a year or two ago. I entitled it "Offense for the New Millennium," and spacing is one of the fundamental principles of it. That there has to be an outlet in front of and behind the ball. No one should be within 8 yards of another player unless they're setting a pick for them or receiving a pick. And there must be backup behind the goal, and there must be defensive balance back up at the top. Those were some of the overriding principles. So space is up. Space is really, really, really important. The creation of it. And that's all. What do you do when somebody's headed your way with a ball? You don't just stand there and clog up space. You clear through, make yourself available for the ball, and then you get out someplace else. If someone has cleared space, and there is a gap forward of the ball, then somebody has to fill that space so the ball carrier has someone to pass it to. If someone dodges out of space down the alley, for example, someone has to fill that space behind him so that he can stick his foot in the ground and throw it back, so it can be thrown back one more time and re-attack on the far side. Okay. So it's a natural outgrowth of knowing how to play. And for some, the creation of that space is set driven, and for some it is game and intuition driven. I mean, I'm sort of in the latter camp on that, but I don't coach anymore, so I can think and say what I want.
I know all three of these are important, but basically, so now you've said pace, space, and number three. Then out of these three would be matchups for you,
and a distant third.
Distant, okay.
Yeah, only because, and that was the reason I made the statement I did about Princeton's. Princeton defensively, I mean offensively, if Tucker Wade had space, it didn't matter whether he had Aiden McGuire on him or the pole. He's going. Kabiri had the ball in space with just not a poor approach, but just a slightly subpar approach. He didn't care what length stick he had on him. He's going. they seemed undeterred to an extent that not many teams that I've watched play this season, that if they had the ball in the stick of somebody that they trusted in a part of the field that they trusted them operating, they're going. They're one of the few teams. Some teams that I watched this spring, they couldn't score because they had nobody who could win a matchup off the dribble. And unless you beat the defense down the field, it's going to be a long afternoon, or unless you're really adept at getting fouls and have the advantage created for you. But Princeton had a bunch of guys who could win matchups off the dribble. So I think that allowed them to be, whatever their action was, it didn't have to end up in this one guy's stick for them to realize that they could be successful. They seemed to have ultimate faith in each other. And the coaching staff seemed to have ultimate faith both in their first and second midfields because they played the game. It was beautiful to watch. They played unselfishly. They played with a high level of skill. Their decision making was spot on. I can count on one hand the number of bad offensive decisions that they made. They just didn't happen. And to the point that they were forcing Notre Dame because of their spacing and the fact they put Notre Dame in some binds that Notre Dame was not used to being in. And again, part of that was in fact structural. If they knew that Light was in a backup position, they often dodged and put him in a bind. Do I go or do I stay or do I go? And twice he didn't get where he needed to get to, and goals were scored. I think part of that was structural and recognition. And it also just meant that the guy who had the ball was in a spot. It didn't matter where Light was. I don't know the answer to that one. Given how thoughtful they were, it always seemed, and the TV did not provide enough of a view of the field to be able to tell. But somehow Kabiri always seemed to have a short stick on it. I would love to know what was going on the backside that happened.
Just a quick exchange, maybe.
But it was, a mere exchange. If they were worried about matchups, shouldn't have deterred that. Something about that exchange had to make one of the guys, the guy other than Kabiri, dangerous to the extent that they had to switch it. The cameras never zoomed out enough to actually be able to see that piece of it.
Got it. I love the intentionality and the confidence that they went to the cage with against Notre Dame. I thought they just took it to him, which you would have thought it was the opposite. I mean, in the first 3 minutes, it looked like Notre Dame was going to do that to Princeton. And you just thought maybe that was going to be how the game went, but no way. It totally flipped script after that timeout. Coach, it's almost an hour and 30 minutes here.
Whoa.
I want to...
I'm fun. You're having fun.
It's very true. This was a great one, as we predicted early on. You mentioned you wrote a document, basically. I don't know to the extent how much you've done, but I just want to pull this out. Offense for the New Millennia, I think is what you mentioned.
What I rashly titled it, and I read it for myself, and to share with Chaz. And
why do you feel the need to make the distinction with maybe this modern game, or how has the game shifted for you in that time?
Well, several kinds of games have shifted because the subtitle of it was setless and positionless. That because Virginia was essentially positionless. They had 5 attackmen playing on offense. I mean, some of them had to be defined as midfielders if definitions were important to you. But that was essentially positionless. Those were offensive guys who, and they said, I heard Princeton's OC talk about their offenses being principle-based. And some of those principles are evident. The fact that there was always somebody ahead of and behind the ball and the appropriate distance away. And I would love to see what the rest of those actually are.
I'll try to get Coach Mitchell on.
I can anticipate some what they are, and that's so. And what I went through, and this was said, okay, what do you do? What do you do? And they were just sort of what are the things that you can do with it? You can pass it and then you can initiate a given go. You can pass it and you can go screen with the ball. You can go pass it and screen away. You can pass it, be cut, and essentially replace yourself back. There's not much else you can do. If you're two away from the ball, what are the things that you can do? You can wait to receive a pick. You can exchange on the backside and cut to the ball. And then just sort of all of the you sort of list the things again, really to try to clarify my own thinking about okay, what is it? And which of these things are the most important? Probably the most important one of all is if somebody's headed your way with the ball, get the hell out of the way. And don't just run crazy getting out of the way. Make sure that you're looking for the ball because your job is to make sure that the defender who is playing you has to play you and can't play the other guy. If he doesn't play you, you catch it and shoot it. You need the skill and the confidence to be able to do that, but that's your principle, and it's not. It's a lot of young guys do. Somebody heads their way with the ball and they just sort of go out in the never land and try to make. Here I am. I'm out here open, while their guy can be involved in double team with impunity. That's just that is the simplest, and that may be the simplest off the ball coaching that you can make. Look at the guys. You know who it is that has it. You can look in their eyes when they get started. You know what's coming. But also trusting in what the coaches have done so that if that guy does struggle your guy, which is one of the goals of creating an advantage, then you know he has been encouraged to pass it to you. And you better catch it and do something good with it. Because if you don't, and you don't again, it's never going to get thrown to you again. They're not going to waste their effort.
Coach, I'm fascinated with this idea around just offensive play in general of playing well together. Again, we've talked about Princeton 1,000 times here. It feels like they played together, you know, more so than we've seen a lot of teams. And just balancing this with the need to, or maybe some of the need that other coaches around the country have of maybe you have one guy or maybe you have two guys and then you have a couple complementary role players. How do you balance playing as a six-man unit but also building it around having your best players with the ball?
Hope that you will have developed the rest of your guys so that they don't necessarily have to create, but they are primed and able to react to the situations which your best guy or guys create for them. That the guy does not have to. The other guys know this is your guy, and they're going to be prepared to stop your guy, and be prepared to support if that support is required. You have enough confidence in your guy that what he's going to do is going to demand support, and that he knows that if he moves it, we know that he's going to move it, and that between the other five of us, something good's going to happen. That's a confidence born of. It's one reason we played a lot. That's a confidence born of play. Confidence is not. I'm not sure that confidence in that is necessarily born in just going 6v6. It is born 6v6, but it's we always had a high-scoring attackman or two. But even with McKnight, there was never a. He let the game come to him. It came to him a lot because his teammates knew how good he was and how important he was. But when the ball came down, he wasn't, popping out saying, throw me the appropriate Long Island word ball. But once it got to him, stuff happened. And the fact that he did not demand it made it, and then the create, like double teaming, denying him the ball. We knew how to use picks to spring him. He had enough IQ that if the ball ever went out of bounds, wherever it was in the offense end of the field, if he needed to have it, he's going to go get it, bring it. It was just simple stuff. But we tried in as much as possible for it to be, even when we had really good guys. I mean, Ches Woodson played for me for 4 years. Do the math on that one. Unbelievably dynamic. One of two players that I would ever pay money to watch play again. He's one of them. The other one is a guy named Skylar Peecroft who never played college lacrosse, but makes his living as an artist now. And he played the game like an artist.
I played against Skylar.
He
at Catholic. Yeah.
He had he did stuff that just blew my mind. He was all of a sudden he was 5 yards away from when I looked, he was here, and I looked again, and he was 5 yards from there. I don't know how he got there. It's like he teleported. But there's part and culture is way overused, but the way we played for a long time and the way they still play, they play unselfishly. It's part of, and even when there was a star who needed to do stuff, nobody felt like they were happy to have somebody of that caliber to play with, because it made the team better and made them better. Even if I said, Drew, you need to be selfish right now. Okay, you need to go score now. You don't have to be looking for other guys. But you get to the goal now. Just stop this foolishness.
Yeah, I had a conversation with Coach Spallina, Joe Spallina, and he was talking about how Brennan O'Neill, and Joey, the problem with them, and he was, he obviously coached both of them, but he was saying some of the issues with them is they were almost too unselfish at some points.
Right, and to be honest, their overall development was probably enhanced by the fact that they didn't rely on their special gifts to the extent that they might have, that they learned to do other things. Because one of the things that too often, particularly in youth lacrosse, somebody that's bigger and stronger and faster will score a bunch of goals and will never learn how to really play.
Yes.
And then when they get to the point where the other guys are as big and as strong and as fast, they got no game.
One trick pony. Yeah.
And particularly in the, depending on the caliber of the youth league coaching, they may be encouraged to just score a bunch of goals so you can win. And it's great in the moment, but not down the road. There are other things that you need to be able to do. And principal among them, to my mind, is to be able to play unselfishly. But
Coach Duquette, it pains me to end this episode, Sarah. I'm really happy that you get to go out to Colorado and watch your grandsons and coach your grandsons as well. I bet that's just an amazing experience.
It's very cool. And I need to close with one. My dad played lacrosse at Hopkins. He was my first coach. And the one thing that he told me, and the three words that he told me very early on, which were move the ball. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you play movement games. And that's how you are fun to play with, because if you will move it, everybody's going to want to play with you.
Just play it over the loudspeaker at every club tournament this summer.
I would love to. But again, that what's going on out there. People are there for very different reasons.
Yeah,
and I understand the need for the exposure piece. I wish that more coaches would look at somebody who makes the right plays and say, I know I can't teach somebody speed, but this kid understands how to play, and I don't need to teach them. That's something that's really hard to teach, and I can't. I got it. But that's just me. Well, yeah. Actually, Colsey, that was number one on Colsey's list. Hall of Fame Syracuse, PLL coach. What's the most important thing? If you can throw and catch, assuming you can throw and catch, then you better have IQ. Because without it, your ceiling is very low. And with it, it's pretty high.
Coach, big honor having you on the show. We'll have a follow-up. We'll have a follow-up episode, no doubt.
This has been fun. I'm sorry if I've run on at the mouth, but I do like talking about this great game.
Well, I can't wait to have you back on. We will for sure have a second episode, and thank you again, Coach. It absolutely
the
was
clock
fantastic.
is on an hour and 37 minutes. That's unbelievable. All right.
We could have gone 3. All right, Coach.
Later.